Okay, so
got
who's
rules.
cupping the
We got
balls?
rules.
Right.
Oh man.
I think we're recording. Okay,
Yeah.
we are. Are you sure we are? Welcome to
We
the
are
Political
recording.
Paradigm Shift Podcast, episode 5. So today we're going to be discussing universal basic income. This is Art's subject, so he's super excited about it.
I'm super excited.
He's super excited.
This is accurate.
But also joining us today, we have a new guest, Elizabeth.
Hi, what's up, y'all?
From Facebook. So I'm going to let her introduce herself to everybody. You can say whatever you want, just whatever.
I just want to say hey, and I'm sure you remember me all for my balanced and fair content and comments. And just, I'm here to bring my level-headed nature to the podcast. That's what I'm here for.
That's it? Okay.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's it. That's all. That's all. Got anything else?
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to start out with a definition of universal basic income from Google. And so the definition is UBI is a model for providing all citizens of a country or other geographic area with a given sum of money, regardless of their income, resources, or employment status. The purpose of the UBI is to prevent or reduce poverty and increase equality among citizens. And if you guys have a problem with that definition or you don't feel like it's in depth enough, please feel free to kind of add to it. But like I said, we're going to start with Art and then we're going to move around, and I will interrupt every time I disagree. Go.
Love it. What's not to love about that? Okay, so this is a concept that's been kicked around in the United States for quite a while. Arguably, it started with Thomas Paine, who said that there should be a citizen's dividend back in the founding of the country. Other people have floated different ideas that are similar to it. MLK mentioned a version of it. There was actually in the early 70s a version that did pass the House or certain committees in the House, and Nixon was considering it for a while, which was more of like a Families Assistance Act, but it was basically going to be money to families that would function pretty much like a UBI, just be direct payments that would go and be spent by the poor and middle class. That would help, help spending, help business, help the economy at those levels. Because it wasn't high enough, like the levels of spending weren't high enough and they felt that the give outs weren't generous enough, the Democrats fought on it. And as Democrats do, they ruin everything. So it lost steam. And then by the mid 70s, it had just kind of gotten stuck in committee and then it wasn't voted on anymore. And then it was just forgotten about. So it's an idea that just kind of ran out of steam a while back. And it's been picked up in recent years because of a lot of tech CEOs have been talking about this as far as a way to make sure that basically the economy keeps working after automation replaces human labor, which is another topic which we'll talk about as we get into it. People disagree on how soon that's going to be. I think it's going to be sooner than later. But even if you think it's going to be later than sooner, we're still looking at, let's say by 2040, 2050, where basically human labor as we know it is going to be replaced by machines because machines are just cheaper and faster and better. So at some point in the future, we're going to be discussing this, but a lot of tech CEOs have been talking about it. Certain political candidates, who I don't remember, have brought it up at some point. And one of the things that was discussed very recently was $1,000 a month freedom dividend, kind of a giveaway, for all citizens. That's what recently popularized the idea, but it wasn't really his idea. This is something that a lot of people in the tech world have been looking at to try and figure out, once they replace human labor, which is what they're working to do right now, that's going to kill capitalism unless there's some way to actually still have people to have money that can buy their products. So it's had a resurgence in recent years, and now we're kind of discussing what impact that would have, not just with the replacement of labor, but also people not having jobs anymore. I mean, a lot of our society is built around the idea of like whatever job you do, that's part of your identity. It's part of your moral kind of upbringing. So that's kind of where we're at, is looking at a future where, you might just be getting money because we have awesome machines that do everything for us. But that's going to be a weird change for society. So this is just the stuff that we're wrestling with now. But just, to answer the question of where this is all coming from and why we're talking about it now, it's just that we're heading into some uncharted waters as far as our society and culture and economy. So here we are. and
So
on to the next.
Yeah. So would you consider your argument both economic and moral in terms of?
Yes, I mean, I think that you can make a purely economic argument for it, but unfortunately, that's really not why we're discussing it now, or that's not why it's come back up. It really was pushed from much higher levels, looking at a future without human labor and without people able to buy any of our products, which of course has a weird moral aspect as well, as far as like mass starvations in the streets and all that. There are certain jobs that'll be very hard to automate. For instance, like things that you wouldn't think are very like complicated, but actually are when you get down to it, like plumbing or cleaning a house. Like there's some stuff where it's actually pretty freaking, it needs a lot of like fine motor skill and kind of decision making. But there's other stuff like reading an X-ray. Computers can read X-rays better than humans now, and that's a very high-end skill. So weirdly, in some ways, there's going to be a lot of high-end, like high-tech work that's going to be easier to replace by software. Like software can write contracts better than humans now. It can negotiate deals better than humans, but it can't really scrub a toilet better. Like it's just kind of a weird thing where technology is suited to do certain things extremely well, and a lot of them are high-end. But as far as like, just that level of fine motor skill, some jobs will get totally wiped out and some jobs will survive longer. But, ultimately that's what we're looking at. It's kind of a moral and economic issue where, we're gonna have a lot of people that we need to do something with. And, that would be one option.
So let me ask you just some structural questions, and
Sure.
like based on what you feel like would be the most efficient type of UBI system. So how much money do you think is adequate for people to get a month or a week or how often you pay them?
Well, if we're talking about the near future, or even if we didn't have automation, I like the idea of $1,000 a month. And I'll kind of give you like a weird example that might not make a lot of sense at first, but if you think about your average like rich person, most rich people already exist like as though they have a UBI. So you have, and this is a lot of like where I grew up, people have parents who just give them an allowance. And that sounds kind of silly to think about the government giving you allowance, but rich people have an inheritance that they don't necessarily get all at once. They have a lifestyle that's basically funded by the knowledge that if I need my car payment, the car payment will be made. My phone's gonna be paid. Like my parents might not do everything for me, but I've got my bases covered. And that lets me make life decisions that avoid catastrophic bad mistakes, or I should say
Why $1,000 though?
just because it's a round number.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm 100%. I mean,
there's no other rationale.
Can I cut in here for a minute?
yeah.
From what I've like read online or whatever is that the reason why people have come to the idea of $1,000 a month is it's to meet your like basic like needs or whatever. And based on what we live on in the United States, $1,000 a month is, what they've come up with.
That's right. That was the,
Yeah. I mean, I just to mention Andrew Yang, the reason he picked $1,000 was 100% because it's a round number. It's easy to remember. So, I mean, you could argue for $8.95. You could argue for $11.12. You could argue for $13.50. You could argue for $7.12. It doesn't matter.
That general number is because it meets the extreme poverty level, right?
Yes, but it also doesn't, it's not like oh, hey, I got $1,000 a month. I made a money. I'm going to quit my job. Like nobody's going to quit their job over $1,000 a month. But if you're, let's say, on the razor edge of poverty, and you're about to like not be able to pay your rent, you're going to live in your car, you're going to start selling drugs, you're going to start, robbing houses. Like there's a lot of negative things that people do when they get below a certain poverty level. And if you think about like bad decision making, like when it really starts to kick in is kind of when your desperation and your like a resource scarcity kicks in, and you think, I can't pay my rent. I can't feed my kids. I can't do whatever. And that starts to trigger evolutionarily like really bad decision making in humans. And even when you stumble and you fall off the wagon in whatever way, let's say you're homeless and let's say you're suddenly making like $1,000 a month, and every other homeless person making $1,000 a month now. You get together with a couple homeless guys and suddenly you're making $5,000 a month. You could rent some crappy place. You could all kick in for some groceries. And suddenly you kind of got this ability to pool and resource, or a family, even a family of two, now you're making $2,000 a month. So if you get like a basic job for one, then maybe mom can afford to stay home. You don't have to have two parents working. So it changes the dynamic as far as what you're forced into. And just loop back to my original point really quick.
Yep.
This is the thing that rich people don't have to do because they don't think in those terms. Like they don't get stuck in bad relationships where you're like, man, I would really leave this guy, but like I've got no money, like I've got nothing. And having an out where like you have at least something where you're like, man, I could at least afford like a plane ticket to like go home and live with my parents or something. Like there's a lot, I mean, yeah, this sounds like a weird thing, but like there's a lot of people in this country who are just stuck in bad relationships because the economics don't allow them to leave. You don't have that stability. You know that you can go a little while and then you're screwed. But if you had that bit of a safety net, $1,000 is not a lot, but man, that's enough for a lot of women to get out of a lot of bad relationships.
I could ask you 1,000 more questions right now, but I'm going to let somebody else talk.
Okay.
So why don't we go to Heather and then we'll hit Liz.
Well, I just want to piggyback off of that idea and say that, you know, where I'm at in California, $1,000 maybe as a family unit.
Mhm.
So let's say my teenager's about to turn 18. That would be 1,000 plus my 1,000 plus my mother's living with us again. And so that would be an extra $3,000. And that would definitely make a dent. But like if it was just me out here and trying to survive, and I had my 2 kids, say my 17-year-old was still 16 or something like that, and I had lost my job and all this crazy stuff in life was going on, which we all know does happen, especially to single parents, especially people who are already living in poverty. $1,000 isn't going to do much for me. And I feel like it's weird that they say it's sort of across the board. I mean, my rent here is about $2,400 a month for a 3-bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
But there are places across the US where that same 3-bedroom would be way less than $1,000. And so $1,000 could help them, but not necessarily help me the same. And I love the idea of it, but I really grapple with like how well it could equally bring people out of poverty because of the different areas that they live in. Like Social Security, we pay people differently. Social Security checks depending on where they live. Child support is determined off of different areas that you live, like the mean in the area of, you know, the cost of living. So it surprised me that it was just, okay, go ahead, Art. I see your hand.
No, but just to answer your question, because that's a very, very good question. And the actual, like the economic answer for that is that imagine you have a small town where everyone there is making $1,000 a month extra now. And suddenly you're not tied to big cities anymore as far as, hey, I live where I'm at now because I need the job. And because the job is here, I need to live here, but the cost of living here is high. So even though you have a job, that money is immediately drained back out because of your cost of living. But if you weren't tied to where you're at and you could move a little bit inland or a little bit north, a little bit south, if you could go to where you still could make money, but you also could live cheaper, it would cause people to disperse into different areas. It would also
But I like
change
living here. I don't
Well,
want to move.
Well, no. But what I'm saying is that even for you, if you want to live there, it's going to have an effect on a lot of people who don't really care where they live. They just want to be somewhere where they can kind of be comfortable, and they're totally open to moving. But let's say that, you know, 10% of LA moves out, and they're just like, you know what, we're just going to go to here or there, or wherever. When people aren't tied to high like rent areas, that means there's more vacancies. That means that the rents will come down. Cost of living changes. Like the rents go up now because demand's high. You have to live there to have your job. You can't live, 12 hours away. You have to be where you're at. That means that rents are up, but rents are cheaper inland because people aren't there. As people move around, that creates vacancy. So it actually would allow people to have small towns that are economically viable, and you could just move to different places. And if rents are too high in one place, you're not trapped because you need that job. Like it creates more economic opportunity elsewhere.
I mean,
Even if you don't want to go, other people could go.
I think that sounds right, but I feel like there's too many variables to say that is what would happen.
Well, and the thing is that it won't happen for everybody. This is just something that affects the margins, and it's not like it's going to be a game changer, life changer for everybody. But if you can stop, like if you even think about being homeless, if you can stop people from being homeless, homelessness is so much more expensive for society than just giving people a little bit of money to keep them out of being homeless. Like if you think about the costs with law enforcement, with medicine, with just everything, like just the services cost to it versus just not going there in the first place. Like there's so many things at the margins where like, no, it's not going to help everybody. And there's certainly circumstances where it just won't make a dent. But
simplistic solution to throw money at homeless people. homeless people are homeless for various reasons, right? A lot of the time it's mental health issues, right?
Yeah.
Or really intense substance abuse issues.
But
But nothing. I mean, you can.
no, I mean, but sometimes it's not.
You're not necessarily going to spend it in a responsible way. I mean, you're
Yeah.
assuming a lot, and the problem with this UBI is once you implement it, it's not something you can just take away. It's something that you're going to have to stay with, and if it doesn't work, and all these variables that you're talking about, right? All these different intricacies of this plan don't work out the way you think they are. They could have a significant impact, right? Detrimental impact to the country. But anyway,
That's true. But just to your point about homelessness, like I was just saying that it's not going to help everybody. Like it's at the margins. If you look at like a group of 100 homeless people, you're going to have some that have severe mental illness problems. And you're going to have some that have severe substance abuse problems. I mean, absolutely. And throwing money at them, it's not really going to help because that's not really what their problem is.
that's
But
right.
you're also going to have a lot of people who are just living in their cars because they just can't afford the rent. So it is going to help them. So I don't think that looking at it as like a solution to everything is the point. It's a way to restructure society in a way that's going to stop a lot of problems before they ever start. It's not going to fix somebody who has like severe mental health problems that needs like state intervention. Like there's no way to just like
Right.
to get around that. Like there's no libertarian solution to mental health. Like you just need to fund that directly.
Yeah.
That's a
So
different issue.
you can't just have UBI. You have to expect
No.
that there's other programs out there to continue to uplift the community and all
And
of the
that
different things
creates
going on.
a lot more questions. But I want to go to Liz and give her an opportunity
Yeah.
because we've been on for 20 minutes now.
No, just kind of to go back to Art's point about crime, that inequality drives crime. If you look at any social safety net, any kind of welfare program, when people don't have what they need and they're not taken care of, they're going to get it one way or the other. And so either we're going to help these people or they're going to break into your car and steal your stereo and stuff like that. I mean, you have to help people. And when you look at something like UBI and you say, well, if they're homeless, they're going to spend it on alcohol, or if they do this, they're going to do that with it or whatever. People need like a way to come up. And right now, any social safety net program you have, there's like a limit. If you, you get this much a month in food stamps and you work at this job and you get paid that amount, and now you get a raise and now you make $75 more a week. Well, guess what? Now you don't get food stamps anymore. You don't get any of that anymore. So
Yep.
we currently have a system that incentivizes people to not try to come out of it, because if they even just get one extra loaf of bread, we take away everything else. So by giving people this $1,000 that we're going to say, hey, we're not going to tell you what to do with it. If you want to take it all and spend it on Natty Light, that's your business. But most people are going to take the money and they're going to do something responsible with it. Like Heather, she was speaking about California and where she lives, and how that's not really going to have much of an impact. I live in Crestview, Florida. I have a 1,500 square foot house. It's 4 bedrooms, and my mortgage is $787 a month. So an extra $1,000 a month just for me as one adult would cover my mortgage, plus leave me a couple $100 to spare. Now with 2 working adults in the home, that's $2,000. That covers my mortgage. That covers my car payment. That covers literally I already gave you the breakdown. My car payment's $300. So I've got literally one check. I've got my mortgage and my car payment. My life is cheap. Don't judge me. But either way, the point is that, yes, they do need to look at things like, where people are at and stuff like that. But by just going off this round number of $1,000, it can impact a lot of lives and it can help people. And as Art already mentioned, it alleviates some of the stress from other systems that are overworked, like healthcare systems, and like you said, mental health systems. You're gonna pay for that homeless guy one way or the other when he takes a shit, in the middle of your office center, and some cops have to come take him and no, I'm serious, and take him to jail and all that. And somebody's got to clean that up. That costs money. You know what I mean? Well, we could just give him $1,000. He can go get an apartment by the river. I don't know, but I'm just saying that these costs are gonna happen one way or the other.
Do you think that, let's say we were giving everyone $1,000 a month and every homeless person that we could locate opted in to receive this, that they would then migrate to places where they could then afford a place to live and food and other types of care? Do you think that would make them migrate? Because currently they come to the better climate cities, they come to the denser cities because they get handouts that help them survive.
Well, and they can, I
Yep.
mean, well, like in Florida, I mean, a lot of them come to Florida because if you're homeless, it's a lot easier to make it through, November, the
Exactly. That's why they're all here at my beach
in
town as
Florida
well.
versus Michigan. But
Yeah.
do I think that homeless people are going to take it and change their lives? Probably not. I mean, because there's two kinds of people. There's people who are homeless, and there's homeless people. Homeless people are the people you guys were describing. They have mental health problems. Many of them have families, places to go home to. They are choosing to live that way. And that's the way some people want to live. So, I mean, those people are going to stay how they are. But if you look at, like Art said, maybe somebody who's living in their car, you know what I mean, because they can't afford rent and childcare and everything else, it can have an impact. I mean, giving people money or not giving people money is not going to change who they are inside and their values and how they want to live their life. They're still going to be them. But let's try to give people, a step up versus creating a ceiling to where they can never rise up. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay,
and just to say with that, I totally agree with Nick. Like when you say that, like there are some homeless people where, like, if you give them money, like they might go in and buy like $1,000 worth of kazoos a month, or like the vuvuzelas or whatever. Like seriously, like some people are just freaking nuts, and like giving them money is not going to help. It's not going to solve anything. And same thing with like a billionaire. Like if you have a universal program where like a billionaire he might pay like his like country club fees with it or something. Like there's some people who are going to get that kind of money in a universal program where it's useless or it's stupid. Like it won't make any sense. So like thinking about the people who won't help, I mean, that's a valid thing to bring up. But, I think that the point is that there's a lot of people who it would help. And, if you're talking about like Liz, most people in this country, like the average home price in the US is about $240,000 a year. So you could have a mortgage that's under $1,000 in a lot of cases. So if you have a married couple and they're like, you know what, like this life in LA or whatever is just not working out. Why don't we go inland a little bit? We'll buy a place for, $240. You can do your woodworking thing. You got a big passion for that. You can train geckos because I know you love training geckos and there's a big market for that. And, or there's not, you're just trying to get into you're trying to break into the industry.
So
The point is, yes.
So I just want to ask a question so we can sort of, I know you're on your.
Yeah. I'm good.
So, so there's two types of UBI systems that I've heard proposed, and I said this today, right? So there's the sort of the more libertarian system, the right-wing libertarian system, which says, which was proposed by Milton Friedman, which says that we get rid of all the social service stuff that we have in place right now.
Yeah.
And we replace it with a UBI system.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not saying that. What you're saying is we keep everything. We have a UBI system. In addition to that, we do universal health care more intensely than we are right now. We do universal daycare. We do all these other things, right? And then you say it's economic bliss, right? Money's falling from the sky and everybody's getting it and it's being spread out. Except that's not how things work, right?
Oh.
No. So what will happen, just like it happens everywhere, is taxes will be raised significantly, right? And so people are going to have to pay more money. Somehow these things are going to be paid for. And if I understand universal basic income correctly, it goes to everyone equally, rich and poor. It's an unconditional system, right? So explain to me how you pay for all these programs and without making people go bankrupt in taxes.
Well, you have kind of a, you have two questions there. So I'm just going to dissect one. So as far as like Medicare for all, that's sort of a universal health care, it's an extremely expensive way to go. The only thing that's more expensive is our current system. So yeah, I mean, they did those studies that say that, it could cost up to $30 trillion over 10 years, which is true, except that we're spending $40 trillion under our current system to not cover everybody. So yes, taxes would go up, costs would go down. And, for people that do like business, we call that like a net savings. But I know that in government, all that they do is say, but 30 trillion. And they don't understand that we're spending 40 trillion already for what we've got. So yes, taxes would have to go up, but spending would go down. Businesses wouldn't have to pay. Like a lot of the costs that exist right now would vanish. They would be paid by the government. You would pay more taxes for it, but in the net, we'd be okay. Now for UBI, that's a different thing. There's different ways to pay for it. One of them that's been suggested is a value-added tax, which is a great way to make sure that businesses can't avoid them because it's built into every transaction. And it can be higher on luxury items like jet skis. It can be lower on stuff like bread and water. So, or zero, like you can just waive it for like sustenance items and then jack it up for luxury to make sure that you're like a 10% baseline.
That's the value-added tax, right? The VAT.
Yes. Yeah.
I've heard Yang talk about that before. Yeah.
Well, all right. So there's about 120 countries in the world that have a VAT. We're one of the few that doesn't. But Europe has it, Japan has it, Australia has it. Like literally everybody has it, and it works fine. So again, because we're the U.S., we like doing everything the hard way. But this isn't a problem anywhere else, like in the industrialized, advanced world. This is just another place we're holding up the rear. So now the real question is, what's $1,000 going to do for me? Like, and if you get down to it, it's not a huge amount of money. But let's say that you're in a small town and you've got a little bit of extra spending money. So all these repairs that you've been putting off around the house, like maybe getting it painted, maybe getting your car fixed, like maybe buying some more, like, getting your nails done. Like you think about it, but like there's a lot of little stuff that like when you get a little extra money, you start spending it on, where that goes into your local economy. So that creates local jobs, that lets you hire a little bit more, that lets you spend a little bit more and just do more. So yeah, I mean, even in theory, let's just say you blow it on liquor. Okay, so there's a liquor store down the street. They're doing more. That's a business. Like there's all kind, even if you're just getting your hair done. Okay, hairdressers are a business. Like these are all things where even if you say you're blowing the money, you're blowing it into the economy. So that's creating more, it's called velocity of money is the economic term, but like as long as you're spending money, it's getting propelled into the economy, it's changing hands. And that is economic activity that creates job and activity. So there's really no downside to it other than, and if you think about the alternative, is a place where we just run out of money eventually. So, and then people aren't spending money.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but we're talking about UBI in lieu of automation taking over. So you're not really spending that money so that someone else has a job. You're spending to have the service done by like a robot or some sort of automation in many of those instances. And so it may be going back into an economy, but like who's going to own all those robots? Who's going to own all that automation? Because we're not going to have like, I'm sorry, like a company like 1,000 people, it's going to be operated by, these robots. They'll have some maintenance people, some tech people, and the CEOs at the top. It's going to be like maybe 100 people sharing the wealth of whatever is being injected back into that economy.
When is this robot society going to come to fruition? I feel you guys are,
come on.
You guys are talking
100 years from now, robots.
Let me just answer real quick. Now that's a good point, but we're not there yet. Like what you're talking about's like 30 to 50 years in the future, and that's a different conversation, and we're going to run into that too. But for the near term, that's not what we're looking at. So yes, at some point, $1,000 is not going to be enough. It won't be enough to keep the economy alive. Like literally, even those advanced like the CEOs with their armies of robots, they're not going to be able to make any money because there's going to be nobody with any money to charge. So we'll get to that point, but we're not there yet. We're not going to be there, probably for a good long while, but we're going to be at a hybrid phase of that where we're approaching that for a very long time. And as that happens, it's going to change everything. We're just like what you're talking about. We're like, what's $1,000 going to do when there's just like CEOs and robots? That day is coming, but we're not there yet for a long time.
Okay. Well, that ruins my whole argument because.
Well, no, it's a good one. It's just too early. Like, and Nick's right. Like he's like saying, well, like, how soon is all this going to happen? Like what you're talking about, that's like 50 years off. I mean, it's coming, but like, we're not there. Like it's just, that's just on the horizon.
So for
but we need to
instance,
figure out
family member. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I have a family member who works for Walmart. Okay, and they had all of the store managers, assistant store managers, assistant managers, and then they had people just below them, and then people just below them, yada, yada, yada. What they have gone through in the last, 5 to 10 years and consistently downsize, because they've got systems in the computer now that can do much of what these managers were doing before. And people have lost their jobs and they've paid them severance pays and they've had them step down. So, I mean, in the bigger companies, this is already happening. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily talking about, like the self-driving trucks and stuff, which was a big part of the discussion for automation coming into the play, but it's already happening where people with these skills can't find that type of work anymore because it's already being replaced by computers. And I have a feeling it's going to happen a lot more rapid than we think it is. And
Yeah.
I get UBI will sort of front load us as a safety net so that we don't run into that huge issue. But I don't know. You're basically saying that we'll figure it out as we go.
Well, I mean, there's people way smarter than me that are like, or if you ask them that question, they will like look around and be like nobody knows what will happen when we get to that point, because everybody, no, seriously, everyone in the industry, they're not just looking at like getting rid of jobs. They're looking at getting rid of the jobs that are created next. Like, let's say you create a fleet of self-driving trucks. People say, well, great. Like, we'll be able to hire people to maintain and work on self-driving trucks. And they'll say, yeah, but we're already looking at replacing those workers too. So
Yes.
they're not just thinking about like what's coming next. They're trying to reduce costs, because this is what, I mean, this is the beauty of capitalism, but it's also the danger, is that it's going to strangle itself by cutting costs and cutting costs. And the way to do that's labor. Like, you look at any organization, the vast majority of costs is labor. So anything where they can take that out, especially people like Amazon, like Jeff Bezos, you know, you look at the future of that company in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, my God, I mean, it's
Yeah.
practically like its own Skynet. So, and it's a beautiful thing. It's like a marvel of technology and innovation, but the whole point is to get rid of people. So this is what they're all working towards, and they all know it. And this is like why they're worried about what do we do when we succeed? Like, what happens when we wipe all the humans out as far as the workforce? So,
So we've already sent much of our workforce across seas as well. We're already doing this in a different way. Those
Right.
are the busy bee workers, and we're the consumers that deal with gluttony and addiction and all of this other crazy stuff, because we're not doing that hard labor work that we used to do. We've outsourced it all overseas. So
But
in a
this
way,
could-
we already have this system already working for us. We're kind of like the prime
The
example
plan
of
is
what's
to
going to
give
happen.
everybody $1,000 and make them more lazy.
Well, and this gets back to Nick's point, which is that's an honest question. I mean, seriously, if you think about what your average American would do with $1,000, it would probably be to just spend it. Like, you just buy stuff. It's very, very few people in a position to just say, oh, I was just waiting for that next raise so I could stop working or whatever. Like, functionally, it's not going to change much. But there is a question of like, what happens when we're not doing just a supplement? Like, what if you're making $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month? Like, what if we get to this point of like technological utopia where you don't have to do anything and you can live functionally like you're basically like high-end middle class without doing anything? On one hand, that's kind of a beautiful thing. I mean, that's like, it's science fiction level stuff, but also you think about what would I do? Like, what if I didn't have to work? Like, what, from a moral standpoint, there really is a question of, if you don't have to do anything, what if people don't do anything? Like, what kind of society would we have if nobody needed to do anything to survive? Like, is everyone just going to be a self-starter, or like, are we just going to fall apart? Like, this is legitimate. Like, that's a good moral question.
Okay, so what's the response? What's your argument against it?
Well, you go ahead, go with that.
I was just going to say, so Bernie Sanders had a different idea, and he had a jobs guarantee program, which was similar, but it allowed people to have their dignity and their sense of purpose and going to work and stuff, which I tend to lean towards. I think we have a real problem, and this is where I'm going to get all weird and hippie, Nick. You're not going to like this. People have emptiness inside of them because they buy into this idea that you can only be fulfilled if you're keeping up with the Joneses and buying the next big thing, and you're up on social media, and we're constantly feeding ourselves all of these empty things. And it's sort of how American consumerism continues to work. But because of that, and we like set up our 2-year-olds with phones in front of them and they're constantly overstimulated, we can't sit still. We can't be okay with the stillness. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And so a lot of people pick up really destructive behaviors. And I think work, like what they did down in Portugal when they got everybody off of the drugs, they got them jobs and they gave them things to do in their recovery, because idle hands don't work. Your mind takes over and it leads to bad things. You have to have something to do. And so I think, especially in America, especially with conservatives, people tie their sense of self-worth to their work, not just the type of job that they do, but that feeling of, I am making an income, I am feeding my family, I am being productive. I don't think that we as a society are there to know that we have worth beyond that work. And I don't think we know what to do with ourselves otherwise.
So does a UBI mean people don't work anymore though?
Not at first. Apparently this is down the road when automation takes over. So like I said, you ruined it for me, Art. Sorry.
I'm gonna just jump in here and just kind of spin off your point about keeping up with the Joneses. That's exactly why I think people will keep working, because as Art said, if we all get to some kind of utopia where we all can just kind of sit around and have some kind of middle class life, well then that's not middle class anymore. That's now the bottom of the rung. So you're going to want more. People are just going to keep wanting more no matter what. I have to have a nicer house than you, and I have to have a nicer car than you. So I just feel like that in and of itself is going to drive people to keep going, because I mean, if you look at Russia, we tried that where you just give everybody what they need and everything's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay because people want more. So I don't really get where people get this argument that it's going to make people lazy or that they're not going to want to work anymore. I mean, yes, she touched on a good point. They do need purpose. People do need something to do with themselves. But I mean, there's not going to be some guy running out of the office building saying, oh my God, I'm getting $1,000 a month. I don't have to work anymore, and throws his briefcase up in the air and, you know, that's it.
Yeah, because $1,000 isn't enough. I think that number is purposeful because we want to keep people working. You're exactly right.
But I think what could happen is you have these kids who are like 18, 19 years old living with their parents, and they start getting this $1,000 a month, and it de-incentivizes them to sort of get out and do something else besides sit in their basement, play video games and smoke pot, right?
Is it the $1,000 that de-incentivizes them, or is it their parents that are letting them sit there and collect $1,000 and play, you know, World of Warcraft and smoke pot?
I think it would be both. I mean, I think it would be, they're both things that could incentivize them to do that. So, I mean, for what it's worth.
I mean, I personally would love the chance to not have to work so much, you know, having been a single parent all of these years. It's been very hard to raise my kids working full time. I was able to, for a while, work part time. Oh man, it was so awesome. I was home every night with my kids. That's kind of why I do teaching, so that I can have the same schedule with them. But I was there for homework. I was there for extracurricular activities. All of that stuff is really, really nice to have. So if I had that $1,000, you know, or maybe the 2,000 or the 3,000, it would really alleviate a lot of stress for me. And I would choose to work on my music, and I would choose to work on book writing, and I would choose to do extracurricular things. But I don't know, are we the police of each other, or are we allowed to tell each other what they should be doing with this money when they get it?
No.
It's like welfare, like drug testing people for welfare is wrong. Telling them that they can only purchase healthy food with their food stamps is wrong.
Oh,
I think
Heather,
$1,000 to get Natty Light. I think you should be allowed to do it. And I mean, personally, I'm doing what Art said. I'm getting that back fence fixed. I'm gonna actually do something about the check engine light that I just keep driving around pretending like it's not there. I think most people are gonna make sensible decisions with the money.
Yeah.
So Heather, you just made the point that I was hoping you would make, is you just made the left libertarian argument as opposed to the Bernie Sanders argument. And, you know, again, nothing, you know, God rest Bernie's soul in heaven looking down on us. But what he was saying was that we would have a jobs program where, like, you know, okay, like proletariat, like if you want to live, you know, here's your stick, go pick up trash in the park, and you're going to get worth from that. Like, you're going to have value as a human because the state has given you a job. You're going to make minimum wage. It's going to be great. And that's honestly better than a lot. That's an improvement from what we have now. Like for people who are, let's say, homeless or, you know, otherwise need work, it would be a beautiful thing if we could just say, hey, you know what? Like, we're going to find you something to do. Like, that's actually, and give you money for it. Like that's not a bad thing. But it's still the state telling you what to do. It's still you reporting to somebody and being directed, hey, if you don't want to be on the street, you need to, you know, go pick up trash or whatever, or mow the lawn, or whatever task we have for them. It's, on one hand, it's nice, but on the other hand, it's authoritarian. Whereas this, you're just giving people money and saying, hey, whatever you do with this, it's going to go into the economy. If you just get your nails done and you buy some Natty Light or whatever, you're still doing it locally. You're going to the local liquor store. You're going to some local salon. It's going to give jobs for these people. And at scale, if you have enough people doing that, even if you have robots that are, doing x-rays and CAT scans and all that stuff, at a lower level, if I get a job painting a fence and I can have a good job or a good life just painting fences and, taking care of, changing somebody's oil, whatever. Okay, like we have an economy. And for the next 50 years, at least, that lets us transition to the point where we're not even doing that anymore. But it's something, and it's something where it's not questioned. Like you just get some money and you do with it what you want, and that builds an economy based off of what people want, not what the government says, like what Bernie Sanders, the communist tyrant, wants us to do in order to get our federal jobs program. So it's just a different way of looking at it. It's pure Marxism. It's Lenin. It's Stalin. They're back in the grave.
We're not going to force everyone to work. It's going to be to their ability. You forgot the bottom line of that. It's only to their ability. Like if you've got mental illness and you're unable to perform at that job, you're obviously not going to be forced to do that. And I don't think that a guaranteed jobs program means that you're going to be in that menial work for the rest of your life and you're going to be productive and be part of the society. I think it's more like, hey, we'd like to offer you a job, and it's going to help give somebody a leg up in society, and it's going to make them feel better about themselves, similar to what happened down in Portugal. When they helped these people decriminalize drugs and they stopped the drug use and they were getting all of the help, they also offered them jobs. And the self-esteem and the mental health skyrocketed because they felt better about themselves. So I think it's more like what Elizabeth was saying earlier. I don't think people are going to not want to work. I think they're going to want to work.
No,
But
and what she said was exactly right. And you think about like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, how shitty our life was. If you took somebody then and brought them now, they'd think we're like kings. Like they wouldn't even believe how good we're living.
Yeah.
Like seriously,
Oh,
they would not
definitely.
believe our standard of living. So like when you say that like a middle-class life would be poor in the future, you're right. Like if our standard of living goes up, suddenly everyone's like, well, crap, everybody lives like this. Like I want to be better. Like they've got that. I want to have more. So like Liz, you're exactly right.
Consumerism. That's the Joneses right
Well,
there.
it's competition, but like the fact that our standard of living goes up, nobody cares. Like that now it's just the new normal.
That's true. Well, I mean, that's another worry of UBI is inflation. You put all this money back into the economy, or the corporation's going to have any.
Why
Yeah,
not?
I wanted to ask Art about that, because that's the thing. No matter how much I'm reading or I've done on the internet, I don't understand how a UBI is not going to affect inflation, how the price of things are just not going to go up to match the fact that everybody now has this extra money.
Sure. Well, the easy answer for that is that you have the United States right now has basically a debt to GDP ratio of 108%. So that means that we borrow a shit ton of money, and that's kind of what we live on. Like we have this debt, which is now like 25 trillion, 30 trillion, like it gets bigger and bigger, but ultimately it doesn't matter because our productivity goes up so fast every year because of automation. Like just our advances over the last couple of decades means that our economic growth keeps pace with inflation. We've not had any kind of meaningful inflation, despite the fact that we're running incredible deficits. Like literally, like you can't even imagine how much $1 trillion is, much less 25 trillion. So the fact that like we're at this level of productivity where we're doing less and less, machines are doing more and more, as long as the productivity keeps pace with that, and we're just talking 108%. Japan's at 240% of their GDP to debt, or the debt to GDP ratio, and they're not having any problems at all with inflation. So when you have a society that is basically stepping up into the kind of information age, like science fiction nonsense that we're in now, it wouldn't make sense 100 years ago, but it does make sense now. And that's why we haven't had a hint of inflation in almost our lifetimes, or I should say our lifetimes. Some of us are a little older than others, but for you younger kids, like there hasn't been any meaningful inflation, for over like almost 25, 30 years.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Why not just direct some money to like lower class of people? Why give it to everybody? What's the just?
I mean, honestly, it'd be smarter to do that. It's just harder to do politically.
Okay.
Like what you're talking about, like if you just had a cutoff at, let's say, $50,000 or whatever, or 20,000,
or even
100, yeah.
75.
No, I mean, honestly, like mathematically, it's a smarter system to do it like that. You're right. And so Andrew Yang, his point with that was, oh yeah, like the math on that, it's much smarter to just give it to 100,000 or less. But as far as politically, conservatives demagogue the shit out of this stuff. So he's like, even with welfare now, the fact that the poor get it and the rich don't, like it's seen as a handout, like they just talk down about it. And he's like, the argument there is to say it's the national inheritance. Because you're an American and America is basically a corporation, we're just going to call it a dividend. Everybody's getting paid out an equal amount. And he goes, and he's very explicit about this. That doesn't really make sense economically, but politically it's easier to sell.
Okay, good answer. This was informational. Thanks, Art. So we do have to wrap up soon, and I know Art has to go, but I just wanted to get everybody's opinion on any of the recent political news of the week. Trump stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just watched his interview with is the Fox guy. Oh, Lord.
Chris Wallace.
Yes. Yeah, I just watched that.
What did you
He's
think
funny. I thought it was fabulous, speaking of all of this technology, that they're out in the gardens and he has to have pieces of paper printed out of various tweets. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous stuff. And Trump's literally arguing with the facts and using different graphs and asking him to bring his thing, and he can't find what he's looking for. And
I mean, he was criticized for it, but I watched it and I actually didn't think he did that poorly, to be honest. Like I feel like he is, for a person as deeply ignorant as he is, I feel like he does a good job of looking like he knows what he's talking about, because he gets the general points of things. And so and he simplifies it so people understand.
He says them in layman's terms.
Right. And I think that people listen to that, especially the people that vote for him, right? Which
that's probably true, actually.
Less informed people. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not trying to belittle them, but it's just factual. So I'm just saying.
I'm sorry. I didn't. God.
Less educated people vote for Trump. It is
Actually stupid. Got it.
What did you say? So back me up on this, Art. You know that's true.
It's true, 100%.
Poorly educated.
100%.
Love the poorly
We love the poorly educated.
That's right.
We love them.
Oh, and yeah, that was one of the problems we were talking about, people missing out on education and possibly higher education being attacked during this whole coronavirus issue, that it's going to lessen the education level of our society.
That's what Trump said. That was one of his points. So what about you, Art? Anything, any political activities that have happened over the week that you have?
What's so funny is that 2020 has created this time warp where a week feels like a month, and a month feels like 10 years, and the year feels like 100 years.
Yeah.
You think about how long 2020 has been. Even ask me what's happened over this last week. I don't even want to look back. I just every time we make it through a day, I'm just so relieved that Trump hasn't blown up America and just done something stupid. Oh, real quick, let's talk about these Gestapo guys grabbing people off the streets in Seattle.
Oh,
Yeah.
So seriously,
So the first thing I just want to start out with something before we start crying fascism. All right, because I know that's where this is fucking going, and I hate when people do that. Is it as bad as people are portraying it? That's number one. Or is it just because from what I understand, a lot of these people who they don't have badges on, they're in unmarked cars, etc. That's not necessarily as unusual as people are making it out to be. There are some instances where they picked up people potentially unlawfully, from what I understand, and they held them. But I just want to caveat this conversation with, this isn't Nazi Germany. Calm the fuck down. Go ahead.
right. Yeah. We're not shipping people off to camps. So it's a tongue-in-cheek analogy to say the Gestapo. But what it is it's just a bad practice. It's a bad look. You think about the United States or any liberal democracy, police work is supposed to be hard. You're not supposed to have an easy time as the government rolling people up. And it's just an unfortunate part of it for them. But to have rights and to have a society where rights are respected, that just means that you got to have a higher bar for your average law enforcement agency to get anything done. And, you want to balance, safety and freedom and all that. But, there are times where, you know, if you've got some, you know, Al Qaeda guy who's wandering around the U.S. and maybe you want to have an unmarked van drive up and like take him for a little ride, like, you know, there are instances where, okay, like, you know, you do kind of maybe want to, just turn away and just look and just let it get handled.
So what is happening? Why don't you just describe what's happening?
So I guess my issue with it is that for law enforcement, unless it's like an active, like a really, really active, like a hostage, you know, negotiation threat or something where there's, you know, real like hard shit that's going down, you know, you shouldn't be in camo without name tags, without identifying marks. I mean, people were saying that they have like patches on there, but it doesn't say like you see like FBI jackets where it's like FBI in giant letters in the back. Like, you know who you're getting arrested by. When you get these guys who are just in camo and all that, I mean, that could be some local militia. Like, you don't know who those guys are. I mean, that could be like Proud Boys. I mean, you don't know who these guys just rolling up that don't identify yourselves, try to bring you into a van. You know, it's different if you have a cop car that like hit you with the red and blues and they're like, yo, like, get out. Like, let's see some ID.
But is that what's happening? Are they
No.
rolling up on people and just pulling them in vans?
Yeah. No, I mean, literally what's happening is that you're having, you know, they're renting cars from rental agencies. So they're not like police or government vehicles. They don't even have like the government plates. They're literally just rental cars.
Okay.
And you have guys who are showing up in like tactical outfits that look just like militia guys. And I mean, certainly that's what the military looks like, but that's what the militias dress like because they want to look military. So it's a bad look when you don't know who you're getting arrested by. Like, you don't know if they're cops, you don't know if they're feds. Like, if you're getting rolled up by the feds or the DEA and it says DEA on the jacket, you're like, okay, they think I did drugs. Like, I didn't. I'll talk to my lawyer, but like, at least you kind of know what's going on. But it's just a bad look to have guys in uniform that like don't have any markings. Let's pull you into a van and just say that we need to talk. I mean, man, that would freak me the hell out. And, you know, I've done that to people. I mean, it was Iraq, but like, it's different. Like, you don't know what's happening, and they didn't know what was happening there because you got gringos who are rolling you up, pulling you into a van. They had a pretty good idea, but you know, in the States, it's just a bad look. Like, it's, you know, obviously we're not like having like secret death camps where we're like throwing people out of helicopters or whatever, but it's just, you know, for good police practices, it just doesn't look good when you're operating normal law enforcement and you're just doing weird, like creepy stuff. Like, it should be above board. People should know who they're getting arrested by. It should be in government vehicles. Like, you know, there's no need for this. Like, it's the wrong vibe, but they're trying to put the screws to them. And I just think it's a bad direction.
Liz, anything in particular happening in the news?
No, not.
Nothing?
Sorry, I'm absorbing everything he was saying. No.
Did you guys hear about Roger Stone?
Oh, that guy.
Yes.
So
Using
was that
an
you
unfavorable
posted the article?
term, yeah.
Yeah. So he
I heard
called
about
an African-American radio host. He said something along the lines of, I don't want to listen to this Negro to the woman, right? And she was like, excuse me? I thought that was pretty insane. He's just,
Yeah, it is insane.
right.
I mean, it's so blatant, the fact that people are just in such denial that there's this level of racial ideology going on still.
Mm-hmm.
What's sad though is I bet he thought he was being nice. Like, I bet he genuinely thought he was saying like the right term. He was like, it's
Yeah,
super-
totally.
You know, I was like, oh shit, that one. No, I didn't know. I didn't know I couldn't say that one either. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Who
Yeah, it was the
doesn't know
soft
that
N-word, not the hard N-word,
yeah.
Yeah, fuck that noise. Like,
right?
Who
hands
doesn't?
off, man. You are not allowed to say that shit. That was
Right.
fucking
He totally knew it.
Gross.
He was
Oh,
pissed
sorry.
off and he said it to her, and he just didn't go all the way. That's
My
what,
favorite thing about white people Twitter is like what about the United Negro College Fund? They still got that in the word. Like, they were like hashtagging that and all that. I'm like, come on, man. Like, you know the difference. Like, I don't know. People are just ridiculous.
okay. So it's 10:05.
Oh yeah. I gotta run. I gotta get my ass beat
Thanks
so
for
bad.
staying up late, guys.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you guys.
I'm gonna go
Yeah,
eat
it
dinner.
was great having you on. Thanks, Liz. And then, so we're going to be back here next week. We'll have a brand new topic. All right.
This was a great one. Liz, thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Hi, Liz. It's good to see you, honey. All right. Have a good night, guys.
See you later.